The entire process of grant making has reduced innovation. And you have a echo chamber of academics who support their own preeminence. So I'll give you an example. Is climate change. Now, climate change is a fascinating thing, and it's not even about climate change anymore. Climate change is really about the fact that we have destroyed freedom, and the destruction of freedom means you can't really do science to really talk about truth. And because you can't really go deep into truth, you're not going to really figure out what's appropriate for the health of the planet, your body, etc. So let me give you an example. The narrative now is that CO2 is a pollutant, and we have to lower CO2, otherwise we're all going to be dead in 10 years. This is the narrative.
Carbon footprint, yeah.
The carbon footprint. And it gets even more interesting. Now the thing is 97% of scientists agree. This is a number that's thrown out. And the other piece of it is there's scientific consensus, right? There's no consensus in science. It's proof. It doesn't matter whether you and I are 50 people, like the Catholic Church want to believe that the sun is the center, the sun rotates around the earth. That's irrelevant. They all had a consensus. It doesn't matter. Science is not concerned about consensus, politically correct, how good you look, none of that. It's about actual facts that matter, you know, that you can prove where the actual experiment matches your hypothesis. So what we've done is we've made the climate change thing is about scientific consensus. In fact, there's a bill in Congress proposed by this guy Schumer and endorsed by Markey, who's the guy I'm going to run in 2020, saying that no more federal funds to any agencies which want to support discourse or debate or discussion on climate change because there's a scientific consensus. It's quite extraordinary. It reminds you of the Council of Trent. So what we've done is, you know, I look back on my own life story. Why, you know, did I pursue science? Why did I get 4 degrees from MIT? Why am I so into science and medicine? Why do I still do my scientific work? But at the same time, Sri, I've always been an activist, right? I went to India. I couldn't sit still. You know, I had to expose the nonsense that was going on there. At MIT, I was constantly an activist. And the lights went off for me when I looked at climate change. And it really was, you cannot have science without freedom, period. Freedom is a prerequisite to doing science, because what freedom allows you to do is to have discourse, debate, skepticism, etc., that you're willing to disagree. Free speech, truthful free speech. Out of that discourse, you now can be a real scientist. And out of that, we find truth. And then, you know, a lot of my books are about systems thinking. Once you understand the dynamics from the science world, you can apply systems thinking to identify what the real problem is. And then you can innovate a real solution, and that real solution delivers real health, be it for your body, the world, your organization, etc. And if you have health and you're stronger, then you can go be a warrior and you can fight for more freedom. That's really the natural cycle of a very productive society. What we have today, this is what the danger is. It's not really fake news. The fake news behind the fake news is fake science. So what we've done is we've limited freedom. It's not about freedom. You don't argue whether there's climate change anymore. If you do, you're seen as someone crazy, right? And therefore, what you get, no argument, you get what's called consensus, you get lies, that CO2 is the demon. And then because of that, we're all told that we all need to get solar panels, all need to go to alternative energy, and that is the only way out. And then even deeper than this is when you argue with their models. By the way, none of their models have matched reality. They put together a hypothesis which says CO2 and greenhouse gases are going to raise temperature by X. Well, that number has not even been achieved. And then their excuse is, well, we need to be safe anyway. It's called the precautionary principle.
I'm sorry to butt in.
Yeah. So what they've done is they've created fear, uncertainty, and doubt. not based on truth. And because of that, Sri, all of us, the average worker, is going to be told you need to pay 10, 20% more in taxes, carbon tax, because the world could blow up tomorrow. And and by the way, this could be disaster for all of humanity. So in this cycle of what I call fear, uncertainty, and doubt, they always bake in, very cleverly, a social justice issue. You can apply the same cycle to what happened with genetically engineered foods. Oh, those poor dark people in India, the brown people in India, and the black people in Africa, they're going to suffer if Bill Gates and Monsanto does not deliver them genetically engineered foods. Therefore, you shut your mouth up. Don't discuss whether GE foods have safety assessment standards. We have to save the world. Therefore, this is what we have to do. So you create a fake problem, then you create a fake solution, which is genetically engineered foods, and then you shove that down the throat of people, and everyone in science supports this. You take cannabis. I've come openly out saying, look, there's sufficient evidence showing that cannabis creates violence, it creates psychosis, particularly among youth. There's a huge movement now to put cannabis for every woman and child, right? Marijuana. And they framed it, again, saying blacks are being unfairly treated, put in prison, and cannabis can cure every disease. You see, it's always a very clever social justice issue, but there's so much data showing the link between cannabis, violence, and psychosis. So what I'm trying to say is that the fake news behind fake news is really the world of academia now, which controls this entire process where freedom is limited, so you don't really get truth, and then you get fake solutions to create fake health.
So how does one break this cycle? And I want to just circle back to climate change. Dr. Ayyadurai, what are your thoughts on just painting the roofs white?
Well, so let's talk about that, okay? Let's talk about the issue of, so you're going to reflect the sun's rays, right?
Right.
Well, has anyone done the calculation of the amount of paint you're going to use, right? The amount of actual CO2 that's going to do. But let me just even step back a little bit, okay? This entire thing of us going and doing activities to affect this entire equation is based on the following model. Okay, I'm gonna, is it okay, Sri, I talk a little bit of science here?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
So let's just step back. I'm gonna teach you, because there's a video I did, it's a pretty cool video. I actually showed that there's no reason the United States or anyone should be involved in the Paris Accords. Because look, I'm probably the greenest person everyone will meet. I'm the one who created the clean food certified label in the United States. If you go to Whole Foods, you'll see the clean label. I was the one who done that now on hundreds of thousands of products. I'm the guy who fought Monsanto explaining that GMOs have no safety assessment standard. I just finished a movie that was produced by Pierce Brosnan, 007, and his wife, called Poisoning Paradise, where we exposed how agrobiotech companies have destroyed the left half of the island of Kauai, where they used it for Agent Orange testing. I created email, which saves 1.8 million trees a day. So I'm a green guy. But what I can tell you is when you start looking at quote unquote climate change, this is what appears. First of all, I believe climate change occurs. Number two, I believe CO2 is a greenhouse gas. I believe greenhouse gases do increase temperature, and I believe humans put out greenhouse gas. That every scientist will agree. The issue is how much do greenhouse gases increase temperature? So this is the way the formulation goes for, if you look at the science, but I'm going to put it in a simple way. The sun is here, the earth is here. The sun sends 340 watts per square meter of radiation to the earth, okay? 140 watts per meter of that energy is reflected automatically. 200 watts per meter comes into the earth, heating the surface and the oceans, etc. And the balance of this from an accounting thing is that other 200 has to get back out, okay? And the way the earth does that is through a very, very complicated process, primarily, let's say, of convection, which is like when you heat something in your boiling water and the air releases. Well, similarly, the earth, when you work out this equation, has to be around 288 degrees Kelvin or 15 degrees centigrade. That heats the water vapor, and and the remaining heat is released. So you have an earth balance. That entire process occurs through primarily two dynamic equations: the oceans, which are a turbulent fluid, and the atmosphere, another turbulent fluid. Now, anyone who understands at a high level, this has nothing to do with climate science. By the way, it's a bogus field. That field did not exist. What I'm talking about is fluid mechanics, it's physics, and it's radiative physics. All right? The people who've done this are physicists, atmospheric physicists. And this is a very complicated problem. My company, Cytosolve, I spend my life doing modeling. And what I can tell you is this is a very complex set of equations. CO2, in this complexity, out of a very large multifactorial problem, has been made to be the single reductionist problem in this entire formula. And what they're saying, in your
opinion, it is oversimplifying it.
It's not only it's a complete fraud. It's beyond that, because CO2 levels, just to give you, by the way, 300 million years ago, the CO2 levels were about 200 parts per million, okay? This is the first time they've been that low. People, if you want to look at the facts, we actually have a CO2 famine, okay? If you go below 188 parts per million, do you know what happens? Everything dies. You need CO2. CO2 is not a pollutant. It's extremely important for trees. We have a CO2 deficit, if you actually look at the data, getting away from all the emotions. So human beings do contribute to CO2. So in their formula, 340 watts per meter comes in, 140 gets reflected, and the other 200 watts per meter gets emitted. Their models say that if you double CO2, which, by the way, from the time that they're looking will occur in about 20 years, if you double CO2, we'll have an increase of about 3.7 watts per meter addition, which will not get released. And that 3.7 watts per meter translates to anywhere about 3.4 degrees.
Okay.
With a 1.13 to 3.4. Well, we've only been at 0.8 degrees. So their models don't even match. Now, if a model doesn't match, your physics is wrong. Your science is wrong. Right. And in order to explain their way out of it, they say, well, we have to throw in aerosols. They have a fudge factor. Okay? So the bottom line is, we all agree CO2 can increase temperature. We all agree greenhouse gas increase temperature. But there is research that's also shown that any system, you're a system, Sri, I'm a system, the Earth is a system. Well, anyone who knows anything about systems theory, any engineer or scientist knows that all systems have feedback mechanisms. They have the concept of homeostasis. Your temperature at any one day is 98.2 degrees, right? Right, overall, on average. Yeah. At any one day, you may have a fever. It may go to 100, whatever, right?
Right.
So what these guys do very cleverly is they confuse climate with weather, and they conflate weather to climate. All right? The climate of your body is 98.2 degrees, okay? The weather of your body may vary at any point. They'll say, oh my God, look at that flooding that took place, right? So they are very clever at creating alarmism, but not looking at the overall homeostasis. So Richard Lindzen, a professor at MIT, head of the meteorological group, he actually wrote to Trump and he said, stay out of the Paris Accords. And this is independently to what I did. And I called up Lindzen, and he said after he wrote that report, the president of MIT, the other scientists all got on him, wrote a letter to Trump denouncing him. And privately, they apologized. And I said, Dick, why did they do that? He goes, Shiva, one word, money. $2 billion has been opened up for climate impact studies, for climate scientists. There's not enough climate scientists, Rick. So every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the business school, in anthropology, sociology, is doing climate science now. You can write a paper or a research thing on, bed bugs and GMO and climate science, Syrian war, and climate change, and you'll
probably get funded. I'll probably get funded.
$20 to $40 million comes to MIT every year. But they don't want to give up this racket. These are academics. They're not scientists. The real scientists like Happer, like Lindzen, like others, what Lindzen showed in a paper in 2000 was the iris effect. And what he showed was the cirrus clouds, that they get thinner and thicker based on temperature. And the thinner, the thicker they get, they're able to hold, and the thinner they get, they're able to release heat.
Right.
So the Earth actually has homeostasis methods. It's not like a dumb system. Every natural system knows how to modulate. Interesting enough, what Lindzen showed was there was a faint sun theory that came out in the 1970s by Carl Sagan. It was a faint sun paradox. 2.5 billion years ago, the sun was 30% less in heat. So you would think what, Sri? If the sun was less heat, what do you think the Earth should be?
Much, much colder.
Much, much colder. Guess what? The Earth's temperature was around the same it is now, 15 degrees Celsius.
Oh, so there was a self-regulatory mechanism inside.
Right. Right. So what Sagan and others, because they were all theorists of greenhouse gases, are the only modulator. They said, "Oh my God, there must have been more greenhouse gases, so, ammonia, etc." But it would have been 100 times more. It wasn't that. It was the cirrus clouds. So that's one example. A recent paper just came out. Amazing work done by Danish scientists over 20 years. They've actually shown that the sun and our solar system spins around the Milky Way every 280 million years. And in during some periods, it goes through the arms of the Milky Way, much more cosmic rays. And then in other phases, it goes through the space between them. Less cosmic rays.
Before you continue, please, I want to set the context here. When the sun spins through the Milky Way, is it dragging the entire planetary system along with it?
Yeah. The whole thing moves.
Okay. Please continue.
Right? So the entire, because remember, we're moving around the sun. There's a heliosphere, which is like a shield around everything, which moves. And as the sun moves around the Milky Way every 280 million years, it is going through valleys and troughs of higher cosmic radiation and lower cosmic radiation. Those cycles itself affect the Earth's temperature by 10 to 15 degrees. In fact, most of the stuff is space. In the normal course, right, except when the sun is moving through those arms, the Earth's temperature, believe it or not, is much, much higher, okay? Because there's less cosmic rays coming in, more of the sun's rays come in, okay? And I'll explain that later. But the point is, we typically don't have polar ice caps. When we go through the period of the belts or the arms of the Milky Way, you have more cosmic rays, okay? And what you have is you have more cloud cover, believe it or not, and the Earth's temperature cools down. Okay, we're actually in an ice age period now, okay? Mm-hmm. And within that, the sun itself has its cycles of cooling and warming. And what the Danish scientists show is by this natural process where we're in a galactic system, the Earth's temperature is going to move up by 2 degrees, independent of CO2. The point is, the fake scientists, what they do is they reduce complex systems, and this is sort of their formula for, in any world, they always take a very complex system and reduce it to a single variable. And then they take that single variable and they show how it's going to affect some population, humanity, women, poor blacks, right? Whatever, right? And then that gets spun by the fake news into sound bites. And so what gets thrown down, thrown under the rug is a real science, the complexity of what's going on, and you come up with a fake problem and a fake solution, and then you create fake heroes out of it too.
So that's how do we